conducted, Gallup polls, one poll called the Roper poll. The results were extrapolated and sent to over 150,000 American GPs, medical practitioners. That basically said it's almost at epidemic proportions. They estimate that up to 4 million Americans may have had an alien abduction experience, as they believe. And then you've really got to wonder, why is the nature of it so deceptive? You know, if they're really here to help us, as some of these contacts claim, you know, why do they go around acting deceptively? Why do they stealthily abduct people in the middle of the night? And, you know, when I say it was confronting, there was some subject matter that was particularly disturbing. You know, people claim they've been taken onto a spaceship and probed in all parts of their bodies. There are sexual encounters. There seems to be some sort of almost ritual abuse that's going on. So you've got to ask, why would advanced, you know, evolved creatures, you know, kidnap people in the middle of the night and do these horrible things to them, and yet say, you know, we're here to help you evolve? And it's interesting that, you know, we'd like to apply, if you like, a scientific tag to it. But quite simply, it seems that these creatures claim that they fly millions of light years across the universe to basically deny the Bible, Christianity, and teach us almost New Age beliefs. Why would advanced extraterrestrials come just to teach us religious messages? It seems to me, and again the researchers will show you, that the messages being received are deceptive, and will tell you things like, well, you know, we've come from Venus or Mars. In the 60s, that was the messages. Well, we now know that's impossible. Now they say they come from Sirius or Orion or Zeta Reticuli or somewhere far off, where we can't test those claims. And that's the problem. And some of the stories they've told us, like that, we know to be demonstrably not true. And if someone comes to you, Chris, and tells you a story and does all these things and says, I'm here to help you, but then does brutal things to you and then lies to you, then I don't think trust is a good place.
In his book, Flying Saucer Pilgrimage, Bryant Reeves summarizes his findings in this statement. From our analysis, the teachings of the space beings appear to support many of the principles taught in Oriental philosophy by seers of the Far East. UFO researcher John Weldon then offers this question. How credible is it to think that literally thousands of genuine extraterrestrials would fly millions of light years simply to teach New Age philosophy, deny Christianity, and support the occult? And why would the entities actually possess and inhabit people just like demons do if they were really advanced extraterrestrials? Bud Hopkins has written several books on UFOs, including Missing Time and Intruders. He is one of the foremost experts on abduction cases, otherwise known as close encounters of the fourth kind.
And now we've come to the conclusion that abduction, of their involvement with human beings, that this is the center of the entire UFO phenomenon, and that actually when people have UFO sightings, it's very possible that what they're seeing is something on its way to or from an abduction of somebody. They're not just flying around up there, they are interested very profoundly in human beings.
Whitley Strieber claims to have been abducted by alien beings on more than one occasion and wrote of his experiences in his best-selling book, Communion.
I've had, since I wrote Communion, over 55,000 letters from people around the world who've had this similar things that think they have happened to them, and we still get about 200 a week.
The Intruders Foundation and the Fund for UFO Research show that 1 out of every 50 American adults, 3.7 million people, indicate that they may have had an abduction experience with an unidentified flying object.
I think one of the most scariest things was when the UFO followed him from work, and he noticed it going above his car.
And I saw this object hovering above where my apartment complex was, and it was, you know, plain as day. Ran upstairs, got my friend and my sister. We came back out and got my video camera and took a little bit of video of it. And then that night, I was abducted. They took me against my will. My first experience was almost polite, though it wasn't. And I've had other experiences that were absolutely terrifying. So, you know, there's a mix.
Close encounters of the fourth kind are by far the most frightening. Those who claim to have been abducted by aliens and taken against their will. Perhaps the most famous case was that of Betty and Barney Hill. Their story began on the night of September 19, 1961, as they were returning to their New Hampshire home from a vacation in Canada. They saw a distant point of light which seemed to move erratically. As it moved closer, it became more intense. Betty Hill remembers.
This craft left the top of the mountain, came out of the highway, and stopped in midair. Barney took the binoculars and started out of the car in an attempt to identify the craft. And as he did this, he saw a group of figures standing in the windows looking down at him. One was saying to him, "Don't be afraid. Keep looking. Keep looking. Stay there. Don't be afraid. No harm's going to come to you, but stay there." And the craft started to descend. And Barney ran back to the car, saying we had to get out of there. They were going to capture us. And we took off speeding down the highway.
They made it home without further incident. But in the days and months that followed, they experienced nightmares, flashbacks, and extreme anxiety. They were also unable to account for more than 2 hours between the time they first encountered the UFO and the time they reached home. Where had the missing time gone? What had happened? They sought out a psychiatrist, and through hypnosis, Betty and Barney Hill narrated a tale much stranger than the one that had been lodged in their conscious members, being able to offer a detailed description of her alien abductors.
They're all shot. The leader, I would say, was my height, or just a little taller than I am, and I'm 5 foot. They were bald, no hair, no eyebrows, no eyelashes, and no earlobes, no ear, we could say. Very large eyes, very small, flat nose, thin slit for men.
Betty Hill said that they were most interested in human sexuality and that they communicated through a form of telepathy that sounded like a voice loud and clear inside their heads.
John Keel is a world-renowned expert with unidentified flying objects and has written numerous books and articles on the subject. A self-described agnostic, he made this statement: "Thousands of books have been written on the subject of demonology, which is the ancient and scholarly study on monsters and demons. The manifestations and occurrences described in this literature are identical to the UFO phenomena. Victims from demonic possession suffered from the same medical and emotional symptoms as the UFO contactees."
Phenomenon was a real phenomenon. This was something that was actually happening to these people.
I was like paralyzed.
What you call like a little being, but he was luminescent, like light.
The big bulbous head, the gray skin. What I saw was a typical gray black eye.
You have to repeat talk. They all were dealing with something that was very unusual from a human perspective. This was something I felt that we needed an answer to, because at this point in time there were no answers.
My name is Joyce Ahrens. I'm a floral designer. Well, I am separated from my husband. We've been separated for about 5 years. I have 2 children, a boy and a girl. I have 9 grandchildren. One abduction experience we had, both of us, and both of us remember this too. I was laying in the bed, my husband and I was laying on my right side. And all I could see, when I opened my eyes, all I could see was this red light above the window, and I could see my husband's shoulder, but I was like paralyzed. His skin looked like elephant skin. He had the big bulbous head with a big wraparound eye.
Crazy. It sounds impossible. It is impossible according to our physics, but we often use hypnosis to help flesh out all the recollections.
A top scientist, Dr. Leo Sprinkle, conducted a 5-year study of 82 persons who reported UFO experiences. Most of them were able to relive the experience through hypnosis, and all suffered severe psychological disturbances afterwards. They claimed to have been taken inside spaceships and examined by humanoids who communicated telepathic messages to them. In his book, Secrets of the UFOs, ufologist Don Elkins made the following observation. I have found that some people can achieve the contact phenomenon simply by being hypnotized, and the same general message permeates over 90% of the millions of words received by thousands of people around the world.
No one knows what hypnosis is. No one knows what goes on in the mind. It's an altered state of consciousness like yogis and witch doctors have been practicing. It loosens the normal connection between your spirit and your brain, and of course if the hypnotist can control you, make all kinds of suggestions, make you think things are happening that are not happening, make you think you have powers that you don't, experiences that you haven't, even implant memories. Other beings, if there are other minds out there, they could also do the same thing. Sir John Eccles, Nobel Prize winner for his research on the brain, describes the brain as, quote, a machine that a ghost can operate, unquote. What he means by that is your spirit operates your brain in a normal state of consciousness. In an altered state, reached under yoga, TM, hypnosis, you have loosened the normal connection between your spirit and your brain, and that allows another spirit, other entities, other minds to interpose themselves and begin to tick off the neurons in your brain, create a universe of illusion. I believe that it's demonic. I think all of the evidence indicates that.
I would say I was assaulted by something from the unknown rather than possessed by it. I hope that I was never possessed by it, although there are those who might disagree with me. And I don't think it was something out of craziness. If it came out of my mind, it came out of a part of my mind that is universal to us all.
Like Stryper, there are thousands of others who have also sensed something evil and demonic. Something is here, probing people, inspecting them, planting thoughts in their minds, and manipulating their bodies. Some people claim that by allowing themselves to be put into an hypnotic trance, they are acting as a channeling device, in which the extraterrestrial being speaks through them.
Hello, Philip. How are you today?
Very good, Leah. How are you?
Very fine, thank you. So, what is it that you wanted to know?
Where are you from?
I'm from Venus.
I don't think anybody's going to believe that you or anybody else could be from Venus. Could you explain to us how you could be when everybody knows it's uninhabitable?
We think it's uninhabitable because it is not inhabitable by physical life forms. We have bodies of light.
While Leah rambles on with fantastical ideas, she soon compels the audience toward global unity, a message found throughout the New Age movement.
Can you, with all of your different ideas, all of your different races, come together as one planet and one people?
Now the interviewer asks the woman to exchange spirits and to channel another spirit that calls itself the Tibetan. Tibet is an often referred to hotspot for New Age empowerment. Hitler's Nazi occultists went to Tibet thinking to find their ancient Aryan ancestors. Listen carefully to the Tibetan's message as he refers to the great I Am, the name God reveals in the Bible to describe himself.
I am the Tibetan, and I have come during this time continuum to discuss with you the idea of the only question in the universe. And that question is, what is? And the answer is, I am. For all things that are created, that were created, that shall be created, fall under the question, what is? And you, each and every one of you, are that answer, and that answer is, I am. I am is also the name of the creator of this universe.
As the entity Leah returns, she confirms the You Are God message and refers to the new race that will arise through the New Age movement. Most New Agers today do not realize that this new race is identical to the master race prophesied by Adolf Hitler, a race of so-called supermen who will be their own gods, having rejected the one true God of the Bible.
This new age is where there will be a race on this planet and throughout all galaxies. And the name of that race will be peace. It's been wonderful spending some time with you. As you take this little piece of information with you, know that you are never alone. You are all connected to the creative source of this universe. And nothing can stop that flow except your denial that you are God.
We come from the Interplanetary Confederation of Solar Systems, and our purpose is to aid our brother man on the planet Earth as the New Age dawns. The teacher that was known to you as Jesus was able to use many more of the abilities than the people of this planet. Unfortunately, man upon planet Earth has misinterpreted the meaning of this man's life. He was no different from any of you. He was simply able to remember certain principles. These principles may be realized by anyone at any time. It is only necessary that you avail yourself to our contact through meditation in order to begin to re-realize that which is rightfully yours, the truth of the creation and the truth of your position in it. Know ye not that ye are gods?
I've talked a lot about channeling, and channeling is one method of contact with these so-called extraterrestrials. It's going on at an alarming rate today. But to fully understand what channeling is, we have to define the three types of channeling. And the first type of channeling is called full-body channeling. And it occurs when the soul of a human individual leaves his or her body, and this unseen entity or supposed extraterrestrial literally takes over and possesses. It incarnates the individual's body, utilizing it as its own. Now, this is very similar to demonic possession. Now, in New Age circles or UFO literature, these entities are often referred to as walk-ins or starseeds. These are important terms to remember, because once you see those terms, you'll know exactly what they are. These are full-body channelers or demonically possessed people. And supposedly there are a lot of them out there right now, and they're involved in organizations. The second type of channeling is called conscious channeling. And it occurs when these unseen entities or supposed extraterrestrials join the human in his or her body. The human is conscious of this joining and provides a vehicle for this entity to work through. Now, in New Age terminology, this is often referred to as twin souls. So if you see the word twin soul, you know these are conscious channelers. And oftentimes, if you read a manuscript or a book by a channeler, he or she will often mention, I have two souls. I'm a twin soul. The third type of channeling is called trance channeling. And it occurs when a human individual enters into a trance-like state. So they're not conscious of this entity coming in and utilizing this person's body and speaking directly through it. Now, this is very similar to what happens when an apparition of the Virgin Mary occurs. The visionary enters into a trance-like state. It's usually only that person or a group of people that can see the Virgin or the supposed apparition. Oftentimes, their bodies contort Their eyes roll back in their heads. It's a really frightening thing to see these people. Now, when trance channeling is taking place, there's usually another individual there who's transcribing or writing these messages down, because the trance channeler is unconscious to what's going on. And as a result of all these channelings, numerous books are written and published. And in fact, if you walk into a New Age bookstore, 80 to 90% of the material in there is channeled. And I mentioned Ashtar's book at the beginning, The New World Order. That's a channeled manuscript. Okay. So we can see that channeling is strikingly similar to demonic possession, whereby a possessed person succumbs to this unseen entity or demon's power. And in so doing, their entire being or will are taken over by that entity, by that demon. Now, I often wonder how many thousands of people are actually becoming possessed or are possessed by demonic entities today. Now, interesting, channeling dates back to the ancient Egyptians and Greeks. This is a channeler out of Australia who channels this master. I'm going to talk about these masters in a minute. But channeling is nothing new. It goes back to the ancient times, the ancient Egyptians, the Greeks, the Chinese, the Babylonians, who channeled communications from these various gods or disembodied spirits. The gods of the Old Testament. That's how they communicated with them. Now, in all likelihood, these same false deities out of Scripture are disguising themselves as extraterrestrials, because we live in a technological society. Ashtar claims to be orbiting the Earth in a huge spaceship. He ranks himself Commander-in-Chief of the Free Federation of Planets. Sounds like something out of a Star Trek movie. Ashtar has recently written a book, channeled through a New York businessman, titled The New World Order, that focuses on astounding predictions regarding the future of humanity. Now let's look at some Old Testament Bible verses. Judges in particular, we'll start. And the children of Israel did evil in the sight of the Lord, and served Balaam. And they forsook the Lord God of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and followed other gods, the gods of the people that were round about them, and bowed themselves unto them, and provoked the Lord to anger. And they forsook the Lord, and served Baal and Ashtaroth. Now down here in Judges again. And the children of Israel did evil again in the sight of the Lord, and served Balaam and Ashtaroth, and the gods of Syria, the gods of Zidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the children of Ammon, the gods of the Philistines, and forsook the Lord and served not him. Ashtaroth, and you can see here there were a lot of other gods here. And also in Samuel. Put away the strange gods and Ashtaroth from among you. And the children of Israel did put away Balaam and Ashtaroth and served the Lord only. Now, the similarity in the spelling of these two names, Ashtar and Ashtaroth, in my opinion, is not a coincidence. I believe we're dealing with the same entity. So now we have this Ashtar, or Ashtaroth, an Old Testament false deity who is linked to today's UFO phenomenon. Now, the Ashtar Command boasts many great fleets of spaceships occupied by thousands of well-organized ranks of extraterrestrials. And one of its missions includes the evacuation of selected human souls during cataclysmic events that are soon to occur on Earth. Sounds like a rapture scenario. Now, the Ashtar Command has associates. 4 in particular. And 2 of the associates, or some of the extraterrestrials that are supposedly ranked higher, are Soltec and Munka. And these pictures are circulating the internet or New Age bookstores. 2 other associates involved with the Ashtar Command, or Ashtaroth, are Corton and Athena. Now, that's an interesting name. Athena has been recognized as the ancient Greek goddess, the gods of the Old Testament. Now, Athena claims to be a commander of the starship of Sananda. Okay, well, who is Sananda? Sananda claims to be one of the highest ranked extraterrestrials and is often referred to as the beloved commander-in-chief of the Ashtar Command. However, Sananda's main claim to fame is that he claims to be the historical Jesus Christ. He's also recognized as the Master Jesus. And we're going to see how these masters fit into this UFO scenario. Now, the origin of these ascended masters and their connection with present-day New Age teachings goes back more than 100 years. And I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that the New Age movement actually was started because of events that took place in the mid to late 1800s. And at this time, 3 women arose: Helena Blavatsky, Annie Besant, Alice Bailey. They played the part of an occult female trinity. And they claimed to be in contact both physically and telepathically with these ascended masters of the Great White Brotherhood, who claimed residence on the planet Venus, like Adamski's extraterrestrial friend Orthon also claimed residence on Venus. There were higher masters, and they were called the Lords of the Flame. A group of lower masters, known as the Lords of the Seven Rays, was in direct contact with these 3 women. Now, the revelations received by Blavatsky, Besant, and Bailey have since guided the course of today's New Age movement. These 3 women were so influential on this entire New Age movement. Throughout the years, these ascended masters have been referred to by an assortment of titles, such as spiritual hierarchy of ascended masters is one of their titles. Illumined ones, which strikingly is similar to the Illuminati. Great White Brotherhood, they're often called. Great White Lodge. Tibetan masters. That's interesting. Tibetan. Well, actually, their earthly residence is supposedly in the Himalayas, near Tibet. Spiritual wickedness in high places. They're also often called the Masters of Wisdom. Remember that term. The Masters of Wisdom. Now, interestingly, Some occultists affirm that these ascended masters are, in fact, spiritual, godlike human beings who possess great magical skills and powers. They supposedly have the ability to control these forces in the spiritual realm.
Aleister Crowley, the man who called himself the Beast 666, black magician, drug fiend, sex addict, and traitor to the British people.
He had so many Masonic degrees that you could fill up 5 pages of a book with them. This guy was probably the most highly honored Mason in the world. He styled himself the wickedest man in the world. He believed himself to be the great beast. And he changed his name to Aleister Crowley, so it would add up in both English, Hebrew, and Greek Kabbalah as 666. In 1904, Crowley had a communication with an extraterrestrial being named Ewas. And this being, through his wife, kind of a channeling type operation, brought forth a book that was called the Book of the Law. The next thing that happened was that Crowley had a contact with another extraterrestrial that identified itself as Lam. That was the little guy's name. He was short, and he let Crowley draw a picture of him. And oddly enough, this is very much what the picture looked like. It's interesting that, 40 years before we knew such aliens existed, that Aleister Crowley was having conversations with them and drawing pictures of them.
Dr. Jacques Vallée has addressed the United Nations on UFOs, and was a model in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind. He is the author of 8 books of unidentified flying objects, and has been widely recognized as the premier investigating scientist in the realm of this research. In his book, Messengers of Deception, he says, an impressive comparison can be made between UFO occupants and the popular conception of demons. And in his book, Confrontations, he writes, the medical examinations to which abductees are said to be subjected, often accompanied by sadistic sexual manipulation, is reminiscent of the medieval tales of encounters with demons. He also made this statement, I believe when we speak of UFO sightings, as instances of space visitations, we are looking at the phenomenon on the wrong level. We are not dealing with successive waves of visitation from space. We are dealing with a control system. And he states, UFOs are the means through which man's concepts are being rearranged. They are engaging in a worldwide enterprise of subliminal seduction.
Jacques Vallée, at least at that time when he wrote that book, was an agnostic. Interesting that he comes to basically the same conclusions I do as a Christian from my research. And he said about UFOs, they're real, but they're not physical. They're messengers of deception. And this was based on his research of about 20 years. They seem to be psychologically preparing, setting us up for some ultimate delusion that is too horrible even to imagine as yet. I would agree with that. In Close Encounters of the Third Kind, that first film that came out about UFOs, the house that the mother and little boy were living in, the toys began running around and screws unscrewing in the presence of UFOs. What the film was saying was the same people that run UFOs run haunted houses. And I would say that's absolutely true.
Oh yeah, it happens to me everywhere. Our house really has all kinds of paranormal activity. You'll see flashes of light. Sometimes furniture will move on its own. The water turns on by itself. You can watch the handle go on. There'll be, like the shower sometimes goes on. All kinds of crazy stuff.
I've taken paranormal investigation groups to his home who have done it for many, many years, some of them up to 30 years. They bring their equipment, electromagnetic field readers, certainly a great number of video cameras, tape recorders, the Geiger counters and other equipment, dozens of pieces of equipment. And in every instance, the things we're able to capture, document, is phenomenal. We can have conversations with whatever they are. We're not sure. You can ask a question of them. You can't hear it, but you can play it back on your tape recorder and you can hear their voice. They will levitate or throw things around the room while you're there. While I'm there, on more than one occasion, the water faucet just turns on by itself and turns off by itself. This has happened in front of many people.
So they came and installed surveillance cameras throughout the house, and the stuff we captured are amazing. These balls, fist-sized balls of red light. You know, some of the debunkers and some of the skeptics will say, oh, it's a laser pointer, except for the fact that it's three-dimensional, and you can see that it's three-dimensional and it has a tail usually.
En el exterior de su casa también se presentan extraños fenómenos, incomprensibles para Stan y sus amigos.
One of the days we went outside, everything was fine. 5 minutes later, heard another noise, and all the lawn furniture was missing. We couldn't find it anywhere. And we looked and looked, and finally somebody looked on the roof, and we had all our lawn chairs on the roof.
Chairs on roofs, you know, that would, you know, the chairs that you'd walk outside, the chairs would all be out in the garden, or, you know, outside on the lawn. And the next thing you know, they're up on the roof.
También extrañas sombras al exterior y al interior de su casa, en las escaleras, en el sillón y frente a su gato. Incluso esta imagen del control remoto de Stan Romanek, que parece estar flotando en el aire, salvo por esta sombra que parece sostenerlo.
Like a week later, all lined up nice and neat on the kitchen countertop.
Why do they keep the aliens in a Faraday-shielded environment? Because they have a tendency to disappear right through walls. And if you can prevent the transmission of electromagnetic energy, you can stop them from doing it.
I'd explain some of the visual glances of these things. They seem to just simply disappear. They're gone.
Exactly. I mean, they're appearing out of nowhere and then disappearing right in front of people. And that's why scientists who have no access to grind, they just say that it doesn't make that much sense. And also, if they're just trying to observe us, to take account of what we're doing on Earth, I mean, after a while, after so many months or years or centuries, it kind of gets old. They either would take us over, or they've already discovered all the information they need to know about Earthlings, and so they're just going to take us over or make first contact and just sort of do what they need to do next. To endlessly observe us, it doesn't make any sense.
El 27 de mayo a las 2:31 de la madrugada pudimos observar a este objeto más pequeño que parece mostrarnos a uno o posiblemente dos de los tripulantes que vienen en su interior. En el 2009, Yalcin Yalman volvió a grabar. El 13 de mayo del 2009 pudo captar a esta nave que ya habíamos visto anteriormente, con lo que parece ser la silueta de dos de sus ocupantes. Yalman tiene una cámara de gran potencia que le amplifica hasta 200 veces la imagen, lo cual le permite captar a estos objetos a cierta distancia y observarlos con toda claridad.
They appear to have the ability to materialize and dematerialize without a trace. One of the great mysteries of the UFOs isn't seeing them, is trying to figure out where are they when you don't see them. Some people say, well, they're from another galaxy. Most physicists will debunk that for lots of reasons. They seem to pose that way, but for lots of, if they came, if there are that many coming from another galaxy, you think you'd sense the traffic. We'll come to that with some more reasonable explanations, and you're going to discover the two top researchers in the last century, really, is Jacques Vallée, France, and J. Allen Hynek, the American. Now, J. Allen Hynek was head of astronomy at Cornell, and he set out to debunk this nonsense about UFOs, and he became one of the most ardent, competent, balanced researchers in the trade. J. Allen Hynek, he died a few years ago. Both of these respected researchers came to the conclusion that they're not intergalactic for lots of physics. There are a lot of physics rebuttals to that conjecture. They both argued that these things are demonic. Their term. They've written many, many books. You can check them out. These are not religious people. They're not people with any kind of personal agenda. But they came to the conclusion that these things, on the one hand, and by the way, we take for granted that we strip away the nonsense and the hoaxes, set that aside. There's tens of thousands of files you have to walk through. When you cut through all that, there's still a core group, a substantial core group of real events that need explanation. And so on the one hand, they exhibit physical properties on the one hand. On the other hand, they also violate all physical laws. And so the conclusion that both J. Allen Hynek and Jacques Vallée and others have come to is that they're hyperdimensional, that somehow they come from another dimension periodically.
The next question, now we're getting down to the juicy stuff. Aliens must be able to travel vast distances. Well, here's my favourite, the Next Generation Star Trek class. But here we go. They've got to travel at warp speed. Warp is faster than light. Light speed is 300,000 kilometres per second, right? You've got to travel much faster than that to get around the universe. In fact, if Einstein's right, it'd actually be impossible to travel even at light speed. Just think about what I'm going to say for a minute, because it's a bit mind-bending. Because to travel at light speed, you require your mass becomes infinite, and you require an infinite amount of energy. You'd have to have all the available energy in the universe at your disposal to travel at light speed. Sounds freaky, but that's basically the problem. So they come up with ideas of warp space. They create bubbles in the space-time continuum and travel on those. And science fiction to the rescue. See, when they create that, you travel faster than warp, then you've got the trouble of all the occupants get splattered on the walls and when they accelerate and all this type of stuff. But science fiction to the rescue again, you create inertial dampers. Heard those? Etc. But you know, it's estimated that it's 100,000 dust particles per cubic kilometre of space. And you know that an impact with one of those at light speed, or even, let's say, even 1/10 light speed, would be the equivalent of several tons of TNT going off in the spaceship. So then you've got to have machines and technology to be available to detect specks of dust in front of you, and so the whole thing really becomes impossible.
So these demons would make them then spiritual phenomenon, I would take it, right?
Yeah, I think when you look at it, I mean, there's certain characteristics that everyone will agree has been seen and demonstrated also by these UFOs, such as they penetrate the ground, they penetrate water, they disappear in front of people, they appear right in front of people. One person will see a UFO and the person next to them will not see the UFO. They change colors, sometimes only one accelerating. They change shape, they change size. Many people have made the comment that they seem like they're alive almost. And so these are all characteristics of something that's not a physical or material being or construction. It's got to be something that's a spiritual phenomenon with those kinds of characteristics.
Somewhere between 1% and 3% of Americans claim that they have had an abduction experience. That's over 5 million people, or in that neighborhood. Not a few thousand deranged people, not a few, disaffected. This is, we'll talk a little more about this. This is a very, very disturbing phenomenon in the counseling profession. Now, part of the problem of the UFOs is they have some paradoxical behavior. On the one hand, they're seen by multiple competent witnesses. They are plotted on radar, sometimes multiple radars simultaneously. They leave tangible traces on the ground, sometimes radiation, evidence of burning and other things. So they are apparently real in the sense of being physical, on the one hand. There are photographs. Sometimes they show up on photographs, sometimes they don't. But here's the problem. They do, while they seem to be tangible on the one hand, they exhibit behavior that can't possibly be physical. They can go in excess of 6,000 miles per hour without sonic booms. What on earth does that mean? I'd like to know how they do that trick. They've been plotted making right-angle turns at over 16,000 miles an hour. That defies the laws of physics. That's now and perhaps the most disturbing thing of all. They appear to have the ability to materialize and dematerialize without a trace.
It wasn't until a few years ago that I really started to get into researching all this information, looking at, going through thousands of pages of information about UFOs that just confirmed, what I had already believed about this phenomenon. That I believe the evidence clearly points that they are, in fact, demons.
And, there are others, Brother Michael, who are now beginning to believe that as well. So you're not...
At this point, I today do not know what it was, in fact, that we saw. But when we got back to the hotel, the motel that night, Paul said that he, about a half hour, 45 minutes, something like that, after he fell asleep, he woke up totally awake, and something picked him up, actually picked him up and set him up in bed, involuntarily. And the moment he sat up, a light came on over his head like a little dim night light. And he looked up to see an alien's face with the typical aliens with the bubble eyes, but it was glowing, and you could see through it. You could see the ceiling through it, as if it were a hologram of some kind. And it was glowing, looking at him, and he said it slid across the ceiling, went across the ceiling, hit the wall, and came down to where it was even with him sitting in bed. It went through the wall and disappeared. But Ivy, in my room, was laying so that she could see the door, and she said she saw the glowing on the wall, but she couldn't tell what the light was because it wasn't very bright. And she said, but when she opened her eyes to see the glowing of the light in Paul's room, which was the face on the wall, a little red, tiny little red dot of light came through Paul's room and came in and hovered over her.
medium said, "We have a very special surprise tonight for you people. A spirit will manifest itself openly here in a few minutes, and it's like a big gust of wind hit the building and right through the wall, and that translucent being seemed to come right out of the wall."
How did you feel right at that moment?
It's almost like my heart stopped a little bit. You know, very weird feeling. It was a lady in a beautiful evening gown, swirling. And she said to Mary, "My dear sister, you are so wonderful to have asked for me." And Mary fainted and fell right off her chair on the floor. And a couple of guys jumped up and picked her up, and spirit gone. And that was the beginning of it.
That's how you got into it.
Yeah, that's the way I got into it. After a while, you see, there's something interesting about the human mind. You can adjust to an awful lot of stuff. You can adjust to a lot of things that would terrify you to begin with. After a while, they become common and ordinary.
So you mean contact with the supernatural can become commonplace and ordinary and doesn't bother anybody?
Yeah.
In other words, the more that you do it, you're not uncomfortable.
That's right.
It's just not.
People believe that the dead have entered into a higher state of existence than they had when they were alive. Also that they are in a position and have the capacity to help the living here on earth. So who are they talking to? He says, the friendly demon spirits that have always found over the centuries great delight in impersonating apparitions, departed loved ones, and persons of great renown. He said the supposed spirits of the dead that you're talking with are demon spirits. They're fallen angels. They're beautiful beings.
Just set it out, just like that.
Oh, yeah.
It didn't make you uneasy when he said they were...
Well, you know, it shocked you a little bit, you know. Something that you first hear mentioned to you.
The people on board the ship usually are described as looking like the alien that I just showed you. They're very short, 3 to 4 feet tall, big heads, huge eyes, no genitals, vestigial mouth and nose and ears, in other words, not very much of those in evidence, and they stink. They smell like sulfur. Interesting smell.
The Amityville Horror was based on a factual account of what happened to a family in Amityville, New York. An irritating and nauseating odor seemed to accompany the presence of the ghost or spirit entity that entered there from time to time.
Terry claims that he then ventured back outside to take more photos.
I took a series of 3 pictures of an upstairs window.
But suddenly, he feels that he is no longer alone.
I felt this presence come over me, and the smell was like sulfur and roses. Real strong smell.
When Terry develops the film from his still camera, he's shocked by what he sees. 3 consecutive pictures of what appears to be a woman glowing in a pink light, floating in the 2nd-story window.
Dr. Pierre Guérin, an eminent scientist associated with the French National Council for Scientific Research, concludes that UFO behavior is more akin to magic than to physics as we know it, and that modern UFOnauts and the demons of past days are probably identical. The word demon in Greek comes from the root meaning knowledge or intelligence, implying that demons have access to knowledge and information denied to ordinary mortals.
After what happened to me, the communion experiences, I decided that that might be a good idea to accept the idea of the devil just in case that's what I saw. If you look closely at the life of the world, you see the workings of evil in the world. There seems to be a sort of machinery behind it that is far beyond just the accident of human life.
You can literally hypnotize a person, tell them that there's a cat in their lap, they will see it, they will hear it, purr, they will pet it and feel it. It's not physically there. You tell the cat to scratch them, and bring them out of it. There are scratch marks on their cheek. A non-physical object under the right conditions can leave physical evidence. I think it's demonic. It's a spiritual power of some kind for which there is no physical explanation. You can't explain it with the laws of chemistry and physics as we know it.
In summary, demons do exist and they are attempting to destroy what God has established. They have been doing this throughout the history of man, and are the explanation for the evil in this world. Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party are evidence of their presence. Demons are as different as people. There are some who actually desire to help us, desperate for human interaction. Some demons are terrified of other fierce demons. Their greatest deception is to make you think they don't exist. You must remember they have a higher knowledge than man. Today, there are a host of demons disguising themselves as alien grays from another planet. This is directly related to the UFO phenomenon and alien abductions. They are in the process of their last scheme to deceive the world, causing man to dismiss God as a myth, denying the return of Christ.
That was his power. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist.
Do not be deceived. These aliens are leading people astray. Christ is returning for those who know him. And if you know him, you will recognize his return. This world will eventually be destroyed. not by our doing, but by the will of God.
Not out there all by yourself anymore.
Vi salir de la boca del dragón, de la boca de la bestia y de la boca del falso profeta 3 espíritus inmundos, semejantes a ranas. Y fue lanzado fuera el gran dragón, la serpiente antigua, que se llama Diablo y Satanás, el cual engaña al mundo entero. Son espíritus de demonios que hacen señales y van a los reyes de la tierra en todo el mundo.
Porque no tenemos lucha contra sangre y carne, sino contra principados, contra potestades, contra los gobernadores de las tinieblas de este mundo, contra huestes espirituales de maldad en las regiones celestes. Primera Timoteo 4. Pero el Espíritu dice claramente que, en los últimos tiempos, algunos apostatarán de la fe, escuchando a espíritus engañadores y a doctrinas de demonios.
El ladrón no viene sino para hurtar y matar y destruir. Yo he venido para que tengan vida y para que la tengan en abundancia.
Pronto aparecerán en el cielo signos pavorosos de carácter sobrenatural, en prueba del poder milagroso de los demonios. Los espíritus de los demonios irán en busca de los reyes de la tierra y por todo el mundo para aprisionar a los hombres con engaños e inducirlos a que se unan a Satanás en su última lucha contra el gobierno de Dios.
Muerto. Porque los que viven saben que han de morir, pero los muertos nada saben, ni tienen más paga, porque su memoria es puesta en olvido. También su amor y su odio y su envidia fenecieron ya, y nunca más tendrán parte en todo lo que se hace debajo del sol.
Satanás es un enemigo astuto, y para los ángeles malignos no es difícil hacerse pasar por los santos y pecadores muertos, y lograr que su encarnación sea visible para los ojos humanos. Estas manifestaciones serán más frecuentes a medida que nos aproximemos al tiempo del fin, y habrá demostraciones de carácter asombroso. Es el engaño más exitoso y fascinante de Satanás, calculado para captar la simpatía de aquellos que han dejado a sus amados en la tumba. Ángeles malignos toman la forma de esos seres amados, relatan incidentes relacionados con sus vidas y realizan actos como los que aquellos realizaban mientras vivían. De esta manera, inducen a la gente a creer que sus amigos muertos son ángeles que flotan en torno a ellos y se comunican con ellos. Estos ángeles impíos, que pretenden ser los amigos muertos, son considerados con cierta idolatría, y para muchos su palabra tiene mayor peso que la palabra de Dios. Satanás puede evocar ante los hombres la apariencia de sus amigos fallecidos. La imitación es perfecta. Los rasgos familiares, las palabras y el tono son reproducidos con una exactitud maravillosa. Muchos tendrán que vérselas con espíritus de demonios que personificarán a parientes o amigos queridos, que proclamarán las herejías más peligrosas. Estos espíritus apelarán a nuestros más tiernos sentimientos de simpatía y harán milagros con el fin de sostener sus asertos.
Y esto no es sorprendente, porque el mismo Satanás se disfraza de ángel de luz.
A aquel inicuo, el cual vendrá por operación de Satanás, con grande potencia y señales y milagros mentirosos.
Un día vinieron a presentarse delante de Jehová los hijos de Dios, entre los cuales vino también Satanás. Y Libro de Job, capítulo 2. Aconteció que otro día vinieron los hijos de Dios para presentarse delante de Jehová, y Satanás vino también entre ellos, presentándose delante de Jehová. ¿dónde estabas tú cuando yo fundaba la tierra? Házmelo saber si tienes inteligencia. Cuando alababan todas las estrellas del alba, y se regocijaban todos los hijos de Dios.
Como 8 días después de estas palabras, Jesús tomó a Pedro, a Juan y a Jacobo, y subió al monte a orar. Mientras oraba, la apariencia de su rostro cambió, y su vestido se volvió blanco y resplandeciente. Y he aquí, 2 varones hablaban con él, los cuales eran Moisés y Elías. Estos aparecieron rodeados de gloria, y hablaban de su partida, que Jesús iba a cumplir en Jerusalén.
Jesús subió a un monte a orar. Le acompañaban Pedro, Santiago y Juan. Mientras oraba, el aspecto de su rostro cambió, y su ropa se volvió muy blanca y brillante. Súbitamente aparecieron 2 hombres conversando con él. Eran Moisés y Elías, que estaban rodeados de un resplandor glorioso.
Cumplirás el propósito de Dios. Morirás en Jerusalén.
Cuando se iban, Pedro le dijo a Jesús:
Maestro, qué bien que estamos aquí. Vamos a hacer 3 chozas. Una para ti.
Mientras hablaba,
otra para
una
Moisés,
nube los envolvió en su sombra.
Y otra para Elías.
Y tuvieron miedo. Y de la nube salió una voz que dijo: Este es mi Hijo amado. Escúchenlo.
Resto de la creación. Y también en el 6º día, Dios creó al hombre.
Entonces dijo Dios: hagamos al hombre a nuestra imagen, conforme a nuestra semejanza. Entonces Jehová formó al hombre del polvo de la tierra y sopló en su nariz aliento de vida, y fue el hombre un ser viviente. Y Jehová plantó un huerto en Edén, al oriente, y puso ahí al hombre que había formado.
¡Qué enorme honor! Ser creado a la semejanza de Dios. Ser un individuo libre pensador y totalmente autónomo. Al principio, el hombre no notaba su desnudez. Probablemente eso fue porque antes del pecado, él estaba vestido con gloria y luz. Dios también creó la compañía ideal para Adán, su bella esposa Eva. La alegre pareja fue colocada en un magnífico jardín perfectamente diseñado para aumentar su felicidad. A Adán, Eva y a las otras criaturas de la tierra también les dieron el privilegio divino de procrearse a su propia imagen. La intención de Dios fue que la raza humana tuviera dominio sobre este paraíso perfecto para siempre. Eternamente felices y sanos, trabajarían con la flora del jardín de Dios, mientras disfrutaban del afecto y compañía de todas las criaturas bajo su cuidado.